Welcome everybody to part 2 of the Matrox Monarch LCS streaming encoder recording device. In the first part, just showing you guys the hard physical setup. Today we are going to be talking about the command center and how to control the box and set the settings up on the box. In order to access the box to get to the command center, you need to go through an IP address. Exactly the same way that you would a wireless router at your house. You would come up into the browser up here at the top and you would enter in an IP address and then it would take you into the menu for the box. Matrox, the manufacturer, has a default static IP address that they assign all the boxes. It's the same for all the boxes everywhere in the world. And if you get stuck or you're trying to set up your stream and you run into trouble, you may have to go back to reset the box to the default IP address and then access the box again in order to make your changes and to figure out what's going on. So there's two ways to do that. One is through a network or peer-to-peer. I'm recommending that if you needed to go back into the box and reset everything, that you bypass any switch that you have set up or any network that you have it set up on and just go straight peer-to-peer. That would be the Cat5 coming out of your host or your control computer right into the back of the box. On the front of the box, you'll see over here the little triangle, which is your warning light, and below it's a little hole, and that little hole will flash yellow or be a steady yellow depending upon what's going on, and that's telling you that you have an issue somewhere or a message somewhere. Then next to it you see this is a little arrow in a circle, like a refresh button, and just above it's a little hole. And that little hole is where you reset the box, do a hard reset for the box. There's a third little hole here, and that has to do with the SD card. We're not going to concern ourselves with that right now. What we're talking about is this one above the little refresh circle here. So you need to take a paper clip and you need to press that in. And when you do that, the box will turn itself off and then it will fire back up, and little indicator lights are all going to start flashing over here, the A and B, this. You'll probably see lights flashing behind the USB and ports. So the box is sort of like rebooting itself. This is really important. Please don't forget this. Once you hit this reset and you release it and the thing starts firing back up again, you need to watch this indicator light right here, this little LED light. This is not a hole, this is actually an LED light right here on this encoder button. You need to watch this little button. And what it's going to do is it's going to maybe 45 seconds or a minute in, could be a little less, I've never really timed it, but it takes a little while, it's not immediate. It's going to flash really fast, pulse, red. Not very many times and for not very long, maybe 3 seconds or so. While it's flashing red, you have to press and hold down the encoder button. If you fail to do that, the box will fire itself back up, but it will not set itself back to the default manufacturer's static IP address in order for you to be able to access the box. So you need to make sure when you do the reset, again, paper clip in the little hole over the refresh circle. When you release, everything starts lighting up. Keep your eye right here. When you see this flash red, blink, 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 you need to hit and hold the encoder button until everything stops flashing. When you release, the box will have reset itself back to the manufacturer's static IP address. That will allow you, peer-to-peer, to get control in the command center again. I'm going to do a demo for you on this tab right here, showing you how you would enter the IP address up at the top. Now, remember, as I said before, don't use this IP address because this was assigned specifically for this particular venue that I'm in right now. You would be either using the manufacturer's default static IP or whatever IP address your ISP provider would have given you in order to set the box up. Okay, so I'm going to demonstrate how you would access the box for those of you who aren't as tech savvy. So you would open up Google browser, or it could be Mozilla Firefox, whichever one, but you've got your browser tab up here on the top. We're going to click on that, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to enter in the IP address. Please do not use this IP address that I'm putting in because it's specific to this hotel. You would be putting in, if you've done a hard restart, you would be putting in the manufacturer's default IP address, or if you were streaming out, whatever IP address that your provider had given you. So the one I'm going to use here is, and I'm sorry it's popping up again because I have used it several times already, so it's sort of defaulted into the browser now. So it's 172.20534. That's what's been assigned to us by this hotel here. All right, so when you get in, now that went really fast because it's sort of cached in here right now. When you initially do your IP address in the browser, it possibly could take a minute for the box to respond. And if you've done a hard reset, in your preview monitor, which I'm hoping you would have a preview monitor set up, when it's firing back up, the preview monitor will show up with a beautiful Monarch butterfly on the screen. And while it's doing its boot sequence, there will be a status bar that shows the progress. And just above that status bar, the IP address that the box was last assigned is going to show up. If you've done the hard reset, it's going to be the manufacturer's default, 169.254.1.11. Okay, so when you fire up and get into the menu, you've done your browser, this is what it looks like. This is the page that you get. You can tell that something, that you might have messages with something going on because down here in the lower left side, you'll see a little yellow triangle with the exclamation point. That means you've got messages you need to come and check and see what's happening. It could be as much as just saying you have a recording started. So just to show you guys what will happen, if you have one of these and you come and you've double checked to make sure that your stream wasn't interrupted, you can see we've got quite a long one right here where we lost contact. What I usually do is I clear all these messages out, and when I do, the yellow triangle will disappear. This coincides also with the front of the encoder itself. Next to where that hard reset was is a little triangle on the front, and if you see a yellow light there, that is an indicator that you need to check your messages in the status page. So hopefully when I clear these out, boom, it's gone. You can see it disappeared. So that means we're all clear. I don't have any bad things to look at. So here's how our page looks on the status page. On the left-hand side here, you can see that we've got a channel status. This is where we can start and stop our stream. This is showing that I have both channels going, and as I said, you can look here and you can see channel 1 is set up as a record mode, and channel 2 is our TMP, which is our stream. Underneath the channel status showing the start and stop in channels 1 and 2. You can see the operating mode, and it tells us how we set that up, and we'll show that when we go into the settings. And then down below are 3 options to get into the command center. We're on status. The next place I'm going to skip settings and go down to device. This is important, and this is probably one of the first steps you're going to do. So across the top are all these different tabs. Right here you can change the device name if you wanted to. If you were doing multiple boxes, it would be handy to have a different name for each box so that when you were looking for the box, you'd be able to distinguish which box you were actually messing around with. You have an automatic configuration tab here, which is if you have some previous configurations set up for streaming or recording, I think you can load them in here or get them from a page. You can also save them and generate a file, and allows you to either take it from box to box or to quickly access them if you were going from venue to venue and you wanted to use the same settings. This next tab, IP setup, this is what I really wanted you guys to look at. You gotta come here to set your stream. You have DHCP, and we talked a little bit about this the other day. That's your dynamic host control protocol, or whatever the D stands for, and then you've got static. And right now we're on static. Now these numbers were all given to me by the internet service provider here, and that is how you would get this information. And it's really important that you ask them for all 4 of these pieces of information. And this is where you're going to enter in all of that stuff. We've asked it to display this Monarch on the network as a UPnP, which is a universal plug-and-play device, which means when we do a search for it somewhere, it will show up. If we took that off, you might do a search and not find it. While we're talking about the IP stuff, I'm going to break away here for a second. I'm going to come down here to the bottom. And you see this little Monarch butterfly is so cute. This is a utility. And what this utility program allows us to do is to find the IP address of the box, or any Monarch box that we happen to be using or happen to be in the network. So I'm going to try and see if I can get it to find it. You'll see it's offline here because look at the static IP address right there. That is the default manufacturer's, and when we went into our settings in the command center for us to stream live to YouTube, we had to change the IP address to a static IP address that was given to us by the internet service provider here. So using this utility and the find all can be extremely useful because it will find the box and usually give you what the IP address is. I'm not sure, it's still searching. This could take, see it says it's scanning. Sometimes it takes a while for it to find it. This is a really good way if you're having trouble getting into the box. Also, if you've already, say you're in a room and you've already done a setup and you're like, oh my gosh, I needed to change something, or I got locked out, or by accident I closed the browser page and now I can't remember what the setting was for the box. You can run this utility and the utility should find the box. And you can see that we did use it earlier today just to double check that it was here. It will also give you a status and tell you what's going on with the box, whether it's offline or if it's got any errors or whatever. So this utility is a separate little program that you can download from their website. I have a copy of it that I could send you guys if you needed it. So I'm just going to minimize that. Okay, so back to the command center. We're in the device. This is all about telling us about the device. Like I said, this IP setup, that is super important because that's where you're going to be putting internet settings, your IP addresses in order to stream. I just want to reiterate one more time about the DHCP versus the static. So the DHCP will work, and if you go DHCP, it basically, you're letting the internet service provider assigns you an IP address for your particular machine, and then they renew that address, or can renew that address it could be every 3 minutes, it could be every 24 hours, it could be every 3 days, who knows, whatever your internet service provider has set up. But they can renew or refresh that, and technically your IP address could change on you without you realizing it. Now, I've been told if you don't unplug from the network, you don't turn your machine off, if none of your parameters change and you're still plugged into the same network for repeated days or hours, it doesn't change. But if for some reason you should become disconnected, it could arbitrarily change your IP address, and then that would cause you not to be able to stream or access the box. And so that's why we prefer you to do static. It always will stay the same. It's never ever going to change, and it's assigned to you specifically. So that's what the device thing looks like. So now we've looked at the status page to let us know what's going on. We've looked at the device page. Now we're going to look at settings. Okay, so across settings, you've got 3 tabs across the top, and this is where you're really going to be doing all your meat and potatoes setup after you get the IP thing sorted out. And you can notice while I'm going between all of these different tabs, I still can see the channel status and what's going on. And as long as these are flashing, the box itself is still streaming. If one of these sides, one or the other should stop, that means that something has happened. More than likely, I'd get a little yellow triangle down here as a warning that something has gone on. All right, so the operating mode. This is telling us, all of these settings are telling us where we're going to get our signals from, where they're going to go out, and how we want the end product to look. So we have 4 or 5 options here. We've got the single isolated, which is what I'm doing now, which is basically just this one single screen. I've got one laptop that's plugged into the box. That's all we're looking at. There's dual isolated. So the dual isolated would be if we were doing both input A and input B. So we do a dual, you could do a dual isolated, I think 2 separate streams out, or do 2 separate recordings out. So that might come in handy for that dual isolated situation. Then we have switcher mode, which all of these look the same, input A and input B, and there you'd be able to switch between the 2. So say you had, you weren't recording, but you wanted 2 cameras and you wanted to switch using the box from camera to camera. That's not ideal. I would not do that, but you could. Picture in picture. This is exactly what you would think it would be, the main, whatever main feed you wanted here, and then the secondary feed would be in a little box here. You get to choose one of these 4, and that determines where your little picture-in-picture box is going to be. We don't use this one that much in our lecture capture because we're dealing with PowerPoint presentations that could be compromised by having something overdone for us. We use this side by side. Most of the time we use this one down here. And the B input would be from the pulse switcher, which would have our PowerPoint presentation on it, and the A would be our live camera feed. And while we're talking about this, I want to come over to the video and point something out to you guys. So you have your choice of HDMI or SDI on input A. And the other day when we were set up with our Canon X15, we have SDI out. So in that setup, we would have want to click SDI instead of HDMI. But if your camera was just coming out HDMI, you could leave input A as HDMI. Input B would be HDMI coming out of the pulse switcher. Now, this is if you're doing a side-by-side. Now, I want to point out that only input A can do SDI. Input B cannot. So if you are doing a setup with multiple SDIs, you may need to convert one to an HDMI. You can only do SDI in input A. So it's really important that you remember that. And that could also affect how you want your layout. So anyways, I just wanted to point that out, that could definitely be something to keep in the back of your mind, that input A is the input that has to have SDI in. You cannot do that in input B. Then this output here would be if we were pulling the SDI out and going into something else. I'm not sure what we would go into, maybe a projector, I don't know, some kind of a monitor that takes SDI. So right now it's set to have it come from input A. So if we had a camera feed going in to input A, we could output it through SDI to someplace else. Or we could choose input B. So you can decide on the output which way you want coming out of the SDI. We aren't pulling anything out of the SDI. We normally do not. We use the HDMI out. HDMI, you can choose the same thing from input A or input B, or channel preview. Now we want channel preview because we want to see both of these. We want to see the camera and the PowerPoint presentation. So we need to make sure we're in channel preview so that we can actually see, and the HDMI out is going into our preview monitor. And we want to be able to see both of those feeds in the preview monitor, and the only way to do that is to make sure you're in channel preview. So that's pretty important. The next setting here in production is about audio, and this is where you're going to choose where your audio source is coming. Input A or input B would be coming through an HDMI, and I think maybe somebody told me SDI can carry audio as well, so possibly you could choose one of those. If you're coming from a soundboard, which is what we normally are, we would be using this analog input. So the analog is where we're coming from. There's a place to do the sample rate and the bit rate, and for the audio, and you guys who are better at this than me would know if you wanted to change any of those parameters. If you make any changes, we're not going to physically do this, but any little change, if you go back over here to your little status bar on the left, you have to hit apply. And when you do that, it takes the box a minute to do its thing and make the change. If I was to do that now, and we experimented with this the other day, my live stream would stop. Once the application had been made and accepted, it may still be streaming on the box, and I could go back in and just start my YouTube stream again, or it might have stopped, and I might have to start the box again streaming and do that. So, but for today, we're doing a single isolated, and you can see that I don't even have a choice. Oh, I guess I could. I could choose whichever way I wanted to pull my feed from. I happen to be plugged in. My HDMI from my laptop is plugged into the A side. But the outputs aren't there. The output's not there. So, and then you would hit apply. Now, I'm going to leave this page. I'm not going to hit apply. Going to the encoder is going to be the next thing you're going to look at. And that's where we've got all the dirty down settings. So here's what happened if I don't hit apply. It asks me, you have not applied the settings on this page. Do I want to stay and then apply or get out? And I'm just going to get out. All right, so the encoder, this is where you're doing all your get down and dirty stuff. So right now in channel 1, we're recording. You can see that. There's a drop-down menu where you can choose what you want to do with it. Record, RTMP, RTSP, or none. So the RTMP is the streaming protocol. The RTSP is also a streaming protocol, but I think that's if you were going to send it to a specific endpoint. Right now, we are going through YouTube, CDN, a content delivery network, they're considered. And this RTSP would be if we had a server, say like I wanted to send my stream directly to Jesse in Ohio or Dave in New York, and they had a server or something set up there. I believe that's when you would use the RTSP. So right now we're in record in channel 1. So this is where I am pulling onto an external hard drive out of USB 1. And you can see down here, it tells me the destination for this recording is USB 1. I could rename the file here if I wanted. I could set parameters for how long I wanted the recording to go. This is important down here, the file type. How am I recording? I want to make sure that I'm in MP4 because it's easier sometimes to upload and to do editing and things like that. It's a more compressed file. And then here is the name of the stream that I'm doing is Matrox Command Center. So that's what channel 1 is doing right now, it's recording. Channel 2 is where my stream is coming from on this side here. So we have it set to the RTMP because we're going up to a YouTube. And these default settings here, this allows you, if you were streaming, Matrox has a partnership with Wowza and with Legacy. Here's the preset. I'm telling it that I want to do 1920 by 1080, but there's a drop-down menu here, and you can select how you'd want to send your stream. The same thing is over here for recording. Frame rates, your target data rate. Make sure if you're talking like I am that you're including your audio. We had to do that on both sides. You can see it's done over here as well. For the stream, we have taken some of these advanced settings down a little bit for the stream to hopefully not take as much bandwidth and for your parameters. I think one of the things that could be useful is whatever content delivery network or CDN that you are using, most of them you can find somewhere what their preferred settings are, and they would give you a lot of this information already that you could use to fill in these blanks. Okay, so down here is the destination. This is telling it where I want to send it, and you can see that we're going YouTube Live. The stream name, YouTube, is the one that assigned that to us, and they make it really easy to copy and paste these into whatever encoder that you happen to have. And then down here at the bottom is our YouTube account, name and password to get in the YouTube account. So whatever, whether it was Facebook or whatever type of content delivery network that you end up streaming to, this is where you would put all that information. So the last tab here, we've looked at the production, we looked at the encoder, and we looked at the save and load is the next. So this is showing me what our current settings are here. All of the stuff we just talked about, the 1920 by 1080, all that stuff can be found here. It's telling me the destination in channel 1. It's telling me I'm recording out of channel 1. It's telling me the destination is a USB 1, which is on the front of the box I'm plugged into. It's telling me NTFS instead of FAT32 or whatever. And it's giving me how much space I have left. Channel 2 with the RTMP, that's our stream. So what you can do, down at the bottom, you can save these, and you can enter them into this profile side. Right now, we've reset the box a couple times, and I don't have any profiles saved. But you could technically have a whole bunch of different profiles in here. You could choose one of these, and then if you clicked View, a panel similar to this one would show up over here, and it would have all of the preset parameters in it. And then if you scroll down at the bottom, it would have a thing that would say Load. Just like it says save there, it would say load, and you could click on that and it would load all your preset settings. You could save all those configurations to a file, either put it up to the web or put it on a thumb drive, and then you could use file to reinstall it on another machine or to update the machine that you're on. You can find more information about what the automatic config and the file management does by looking in the manual. So I'm going to go back to you. And I don't have any messages here. That means we're still streaming. Nothing's been interrupted. That's really fantastic. All right, so just to go over again, the status page, when you you would use an IP address in order to get access to the box so that you can control the command center for the Matrox Monarch LCS. The first page that opens up is the status page. And this little taskbar over here is always sort of there on the side, and that allows you to bounce around into the different parts of the box to make different settings. This shows us the channel status. Is showing me that both sides, channel 1 and channel 2, so this one is recording, this one is streaming. They're both going on, and I can control them here, start and stop them here. And this tells me what my operating mode is. There's the status. Then the settings, there's 3 tabs across the top of the settings, the production, the encoder, and the save load. So the production, this is where I chose how I wanted to present this particular presentation, which is single isolated. We're just doing a single screen. This is where if we were doing a multi-screen or even the single, if I had my HDMI coming out of the laptop plugged into the B side of the box, then I would choose the B side of the box here. And depending upon which of these you choose, if you're doing dual isolated or picture-in-picture or side-by-side, you would have both checked, either both HDMIs, or if you were doing SDI in input A, you'd have SDI and input B HDMI. And I don't see it down in this particular single isolated mode, but if we were doing a side-by-side or a picture-in-picture, you get a place here to do channel preview so that you can see both channels coming into your preview monitor. So that's very important. But we're going to go back to single isolated. On this side, there's your audio again. We're coming in from a board, so we're doing all audio and analog. Here's your bitrate things. Then you've got your encoder. I'm going to leave because I don't want to change anything for my stream. Okay, the encoder is where we're setting everything up. With for our purposes today, we're recording on channel 1, but we could record on both. We could stream on both. We could stream on one, record on one. That's exactly what we're doing today. You could do all of your resolutions, bit rates, all of that kind of stuff taken care of on this page, the encoder. And then the last is saving and loading. So if I had multiple settings for different scenarios, I could save all of those into a profile, and I could easily switch between the two by going through here. And then the last thing we're going to look at here and review one more time is so across the top, all these tabs across the top. The biggest one that we're mostly concerned about is IP setup. So here's where you choose whether you're using dynamic or static, and where you would enter in all of your information. Like I said, there's a file management tab where you can save some of your settings onto an external thumb drive. And we'll go back to the status page. And again, this is where we started.